Hello everyone, and welcome back to another lesson in U.S. history. Today starts part 2 of our series on the Civil Rights Movement. Let's jump right into it. The first story I want to tell today happens on December 1st, 1955, the day that a woman by the name of Rosa Parks was arrested for refusing a bus driver's orders to give up her seat to white patrons. Oftentimes, this story is told as if Rosa Parks was just tired from a long day of work, which it had been a long day at work, and she just didn't want to get up because she was so tired. But she herself has said that it wasn't that she was physically tired, she just was tired of giving in. And so she decided she wasn't giving in, and so she wasn't getting up either. Rosa Parks was a member of the NAACP, and she was aware of politics and aware of the injustices around her, and was a person who was going to do something about it. Now, the way the bus system worked in Montgomery was it was segregated. There was a white section and a black section on the bus. And the bus drivers actually had police level authority when it came to administering orders on the bus, believe it or not. Well, the way it worked was, or at least it worked in Montgomery, was when the bus became full, and this is what happened on December 1st, 1955, when the bus became full, the front row of the colored section became the back row of the whites only section. Well, guess where Rosa Parks was sitting? When she got on the bus, she went and sat in the coloreds only section in the front row. Well, as the bus began to fill up, the bus driver stopped, moved to the back of the bus where the blacks only section was, and told Rosa Parks and several other people to move to the back. 3 others agreed and moved, but Rosa Parks did not, and so she was arrested. And her trial would spark something that's going to catch and stay caught, a fire that's going to spread, a fire of indignation and a demand for change in Montgomery. On December 5th, 1955, the black community in Montgomery decided to protest the segregation of the buses. Initially, it was a small protest, encouraging people to stay home from work or school, or take a blacks-only taxicab service, or walk to work. On the day of her trial, a group of leaders met at the Mount Zion Church in Montgomery to discuss what their next steps could be. And they decided that this trial presented an opportunity that they couldn't pass up. And they saw that the small boycott seemed to be working, and that there was solidarity among the black community in Montgomery. And they decided to take it a step farther and extend the boycott. But how far did they extend it? 381 days. Now, there was resistance and retaliation, even violent retaliation by segregationists against the leaders of this group. Black churches were set on fire. 2 of the leaders, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and E.D. Nixon, had their homes bombed. But in the end, the boycott worked. The bus lines were losing money. And then there was a legal battle happening in the Supreme Court. And in November 13th, 1956, the Supreme Court upheld another court's ruling stating that segregation on public transport is unconstitutional. And eventually, the bus system in Montgomery just couldn't hold on anymore. They were losing money and losing in the courts. And on December 20th, 1956, the boycott came to an end when Montgomery desegregated their bus lines. Now, at this point, the Montgomery bus boycott was the largest and most successful protest of segregation laws anywhere. And it's going to inspire other movements years to come. Remember in 1954, in the case of Brown versus Board of Education, the Supreme Court decided that it was not constitutional for states to segregate public schools. Well, it turns out a bunch of southern states and southern cities decided to just ignore that order and continue having whites-only schools and blacks-only schools. In 1957, 9 black students enrolled at Little Rock Central High School. Melba Patillo, Ernest Green, Elizabeth Eckford, Minnie Jean Brown, Terrence Roberts, Carlotta Walls, Jefferson Thomas, Gloria Ray, and Thelma Mothershed. These 9 black students will become the Little Rock Nine. The Little Rock Nine enrolled over the summer, but on the first day of school, large mobs of white segregationists met them at the door and refused to let them in. And then Governor Orville Faubus of Arkansas sent in the Arkansas National Guard to keep them out. But as the story spread and grew across the country and people began to talk about the Little Rock Nine, as the newspapers had dubbed them, Dwight Eisenhower decided to step in. And he stepped in a big way, because he sent not just the National Guard to protect them. He sent in the 101st Airborne to walk these kids to school. Eisenhower was enforcing the ruling of Brown versus Board of Education and making it clear to other states as well that he was not above sending in his own troops and even federalizing the National Guard to make them obey that ruling. Another area where segregation was prominent was in restaurants. In February of 1960, 4 college students staged what would be called a sit-in in Greensboro, North Carolina. Ezell Blair, David Richmond, Franklin McCain, and Joseph McNeil. The 4 would later claim that they were inspired by the nonviolent success of Mahatma Gandhi in India. They sat in at the Woolsworth lunch counter, where the official policy was to refuse service to anyone who was not white. And they sat there all day. They were refused service, but they were there until the store closed. And the next day, they went back. And then the next day, they went back. And as they continued, more and more college students decided to join them, to sit in, to just sit there. And then the sit-in movement began to spread all across the country, famously in Nashville, Tennessee. Despite being arrested for being a public nuisance, it was clear to everyone who was paying attention that this was a peaceful protest. These students were disobeying these civil orders, but were doing so peacefully. And by the end of March in that year, the movement of sit-ins had spread to 55 cities in 13 states. And in response to the success and power of this movement, by the end of 1960, diners and restaurants all across the South had begun to integrate. And at the end of July, when most of the college students were away on summer vacation, the Woolsworths in Greensboro integrated its lunch counter. Little Rock wasn't the only city that was refusing to integrate its schools. Another city was New Orleans. And in November of 1960, one 6-year-old girl was going to take on that system. Her name was Ruby Bridges. In 1959, Ruby Bridges attended a segregated kindergarten. But as pressure started to mount against the school system in New Orleans to integrate their schools, the school board came up with a test to see if black children were capable of doing the work in whites-only schools. There were 5 who were able to pass. One of those was Ruby Bridges. The other 4 eventually backed out of integration. Their families were afraid because the segregationists were getting violent and being very horrible. But Ruby's mother wanted her to get a good education. Her mom wanted her to get and have the opportunities that she and her father had been denied. And so Ruby and her mother were escorted to school by 4 federal marshals every day for a year. And every day, she walked past crowds of people screaming racist slurs at her. Ruby later said that she wasn't scared, except when she saw a lady holding a coffin with a little black doll inside of it. The most ardent segregationists in New Orleans just pulled their kids from the schools permanently. And the Bridges family suffered throughout this. Ruby's father lost his job. Her mother was refused service at grocery stores. But over time, other African American students began to enroll and integrate in originally whites-only schools. In 1964, the artist Norman Rockwell celebrated the courage of Ruby Bridges by painting her first day. The title of that painting was "The Problem We All Live With." Ruby later graduated from a desegregated high school. She became a travel agent, married, had 4 sons. She was later reunited with her first teacher, Henry, in the mid-90s. And for a time, the pair did speaking engagements around the country together. The next time we get together, we're going to learn about the Freedom Riders, Alabama University in the Civil Rights, and the March on Washington. But until then, make it a great day.